Good evening. A few weeks ago, the PNCR elected its central executive at its biennial congress. There were 7 new members elected to the central executive, among whom were Mr. Aubrey Norton and Mr. Van West Charles, who had long served the People's National Congress in its various incarnations. It also saw the exit or the loss of the chairmanship by Mr. Basil Williams, currently Attorney General. My guest this evening is one of the returnees to the Central Executive, Mr. Aubrey Norton. Mr. Norton, welcome to Plain Talk.
Good night and thanks for having me on Plain Talk.
Well, you know it's always a pleasure. I love our interaction.
And an exchange.
And
I welcome it as well.
Yeah. What made you get back to the executive, particularly since following the PNC, following the election, the successful election and the APNU AFC, you were presidential advisor on youth empowerment, and then your contract was not renewed. That's what the press said. Is this a way of forcing yourself back into the political arena?
Well, first of all, I never left the political arena.
Okay.
What I would say is this. After the 2012 elections, I didn't vie for the executive. So
2011 elections.
No, sorry.
Oh, the biennial congress.
Party elections.
Yes, yes.
2012, 2014, 2016. I'd always continued to work with party people, etc. But coming up to the last election, I had a long discussion with Joe Harmon, who at the time was vying for chairman. And when the discussion was through with him, I felt that he had the correct approach and that I was prepared to actually become more active in the PNC. And on that basis, I decided that I will run.
Was he PNC then or APNU? Joe Harmon?
PNC I'm talking about, PNC.
Yeah. No, but was he in the PNC or he was APNU? That's the point. That's the question.
Well, he was in the PNC. In fact, he went to the PNU through the PNC.
Okay, good.
So we had a discussion, and I have agreed that I will return to the party's executive and to do the kind of work I think needs to be done to continue the process of rebuilding the party. And so I campaigned with him, and then I contested, and the rest is history.
You contested where?
In the elections.
You had an in and out relationship with the PNCR. I recall Mr. Desmond Hoyt saying you were a creature of the party leader.
Well, as a lawyer, you know what that meant.
Yes,
he meant that
that
constitutionally.
Yeah, but in other words, you seem to have run into problems with the hierarchy of the party from time to time.
Well, the reality is that I've never been a person who just say yes. And once you decide that you're not going to say yes, there's every likelihood that you will come into conflict with others because we all have different views.
You see that happening now with, in his other capacity, President Granger, as head of the party?
The truth of the matter is, I don't want to go down the road of what will happen. I believe that the People's National Congress, for me, is the institution that we need to build to ensure that it serves our constituency. And I will be disposed to working in the party to ensure that we strengthen it and that it represents the constituency that votes for it, so that it operates in the interest of the constituency, more particularly the small man.
But, and I would say more particularly the small black person. The party, if you look at all the statistics, Aubrey, I think we have the same kind of background in academia and so on. The party draws the bulk of its support from the African Guyanese community.
Yeah.
That if you buy in political language, that is its constituency.
Good, but at the same time, the party does have some amount of support in other communities. It's not large as the PPP zone. And secondly, if you work in communities, you will work with all ethnic groups. So while I accept that in the main, the base of the People's National Congress is the Afro-Guyanese community, I am of the view, and I think the party is of the view, that we have to do considerable work in the Amerindian community, we have to do considerable work in the East Indian community, as well as in our own constituency.
Well,
so to me, one of the reasons I supported Harmon too was because...
You supported Harmon rather than Granger?
No, we're talking about for the chairmanship of the party.
Okay, yes.
One of the reasons I supported Harmon was that he committed to doing the work to build what we call the non-traditional support base, particularly working in Indo-Guyanese community. And even though he's not the chairman, it's the work we will still do.
Well, you talk about that constituency. Now, if you look at the list of the 15 the elected members of the Central Executive, only one of the 15 was actually elected was an Indian. That feeds the perception that the party and its main decisive body, decision-making body, the Central Executive, essentially is a black institution.
Except that if you accept that the party constitution makes provisions for appointment of 10 other persons.
But that's why I was drawing the thing about election.
Well, yeah, but let me finish. If you accept the view that the party can appoint,
yes,
that is one way of dealing with it. I do believe that the People's National Congress reform has to do considerable work and to promote more young, bright Indians in the party who develop the respect, etc., and can be elected. Don't forget, this is the party in which Winston Murray was elected easily, Sace Narayan. I can name a number of...
But Winston Murray, you yourself know, Winston Murray had serious difficulties in the party as well.
All of us have serious difficulty in every political party.
No.
It's very difficult to be in a political party where views are contending and you don't have serious difficulties.
But continue making the point, yes.
But Winston was a committed PNC person, and while all of us will have problems, there were no disagreements with the fundamental ideology and approach to the party.
Yeah, but we were talking about its ethnic composition and its involvement of others, because it's one thing to say I will work in the non-traditional communities, non-constituency communities. It's another to say that I will bring them into the mainstream of the party.
Well, the thing is, you have to bring them into the mainstream of the party. I said this to you. One of the tragedies of democracy is that sometimes people can elect, and in electing they don't pay attention to all the variables. For instance, the list that was put up by the group that I support, Minister Harmon, had Indians on it. There was Shazi Ramla Khan, I think, Hakim Khan, and a few others. Unfortunately, they weren't elected. But what I'm saying, once you can work with them, raise their profile, bring them to the level, and they themselves contribute to the level of a Winston Murray, a Sace Narayan, a Katskan. For instance, I believe if Katskan had run, he would have been elected. So while there are a lot of some Indians in the party, what in essence has happened is that the profile is not raised to the level where they were elected across the country. And that comes when you work in the community and they work across the country with the party.
But if one wants to involve these persons, then surely the thing to do, if you can't get elected, as they haven't been able to get elected, is not only to handpick them and say, I will nominate you here, but to allow them to take prominent positions. On the other hand, we see appointments that are essentially of one ethnic group in our country by this government. That's the reality. Look at the police force. Look at all the state chairpersons and so on. All the composition, not only the chair, but the membership, does that help the image of the party as trying to embrace the wider community, not only Indian but everybody else?
Now, first of all, do you believe in a meritocracy?
I believe in meritocracy, but I believe that meritocracy has its weaknesses because you have to have affirmative action as well. You have to promote interest persons who have been deprived of opportunities and so on. The meritocracy could be very dangerous.
I say this to say to you that I believe what happened in the police force happened because, one, the nature of the police force and the president's own position that he wanted a new core of people.
All blacks?
Well, I didn't say all blacks.
Well,
Remember,
I'm saying.
you have
I'm
to
saying
take
that.
it. You have to take it.
I'm saying that.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm saying to you, you have to take it from the top of the police force.
Yes.
And who are the top of the police force?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm suggesting to you is that if you are in a situation where you have to change the leadership in the police force so that it could be rebuilt and regain the confidence of the people.
But
It is unfortunate. It is unfortunate.
But we're not only talking police force. I'm sorry.
No, I started with police force.
Okay, go on.
It's unfortunate that at this stage, the force seem to be in that position. I don't agree with the view that there was appointment based on race.
They might not have been based on race, but that's what has happened. That's the result.
You have a situation. If you say to me, or I put it this way, I believe that we should be promoting more Indians in leadership positions, but there are many in leadership positions. However, I don't believe anybody should be promoted just for the sake of their ethnicity.
Well, let me ask you about the permanent secretaries. I want to ask you about the permanent
Let me
secretaries.
finish.
Uh-huh. Okay, go on, and then we'll talk about the permanent
Well, we
secretaries.
can answer the permanent secretaries.
You had 16 PSs, 8 blacks, 8 Indians. All the 8 Indians but one have been removed and replaced by blacks.
Who's the
How do you
one?
explain that?
Who's the
I can't
one?
remember the one.
Well, first of all, could you answer this question? Is it true that a lot of them that were replaced were on the PPP list in the
No,
election in
not
2011?
true, not true.
All right, could we call them?
Might have been a couple. Might have been a couple.
So the point I'm making to you, they them by themselves made themselves ineligible.
And okay, but then so you couldn't find any Indians outside of them to appoint.
I don't
You
think-
replaced them all with blacks.
I don't want to get into saying that they couldn't find or they couldn't find. That's a decision for the government. What I'm talking about, I believe in principle. For instance, when I was looking at the staff that I managed, and when I was dealing with youth, I was very careful to ensure that we recruited Indians, etc. Because as you go to meet youth, you want all ethnic groups. I can't talk for what happened at the government, except that I know for sure many of them were
But are you
political.
comfortable? Let me ask you this: Are you comfortable with those appointments?
Which
This was
appointments?
perception. The majority of the appointments made by this government have largely been of a particular race. Are you if the figures show that, are you comfortable with that?
If the figures show that and it's based on merit, I will be comfortable with it, but we'll also put the caveat that we need to do more to ensure that appointments reflect I come from the Burnham era, and one of the things Burnham insisted was that as far as is possible, it should reflect the ethnic makeup of
Well,
the society.
you know, if you make, and I don't think you're trying to do this, Aubrey, but if you suggest that these appointments are based on merit, you are saying the Indians don't have merit.
No, I didn't say that.
No, I said if you're suggesting it.
First of all, I start by saying to you, some of the Indians that were removed were politically inclined. I was going to go on to make the point to you that many of the PSs that were there and that are there weren't appointed by the AP and UFC. They were inherited. If I remember, Magarel was there.
Yes, that's what I'm
If I
saying.
remember,
No, but the
that's
point
the
I'm
problem.
making,
Yeah.
you remove all the Indians, but you leave all the blacks.
I would say we removed those that were politically.
They just happen to be Indians? You believe that?
If the PPP were appointed, let me ask you a question. When the PPP didn't have an ambassador that was...
We know that story, and I was in court. I argued that
No,
case.
but you
aren't
see, you're not allowing me to make
No,
the
no,
point.
no. But Aubrey, we know where you're going.
Where I'm going?
You know, Freddie Kissoon brought that case.
Yeah.
Nigel Hughes and I
Yeah.
I am played a role in it.
Mhm.
Nigel played the leading role. We Indians rejected that kind of situation. Where Luncheon, for example, said they couldn't find any suitable blacks. Now that was an insult.
I agree. But
Now,
I wanted
isn't
to
it the same thing we're doing
no,
now?
I'm saying to you that at no stage did I suggest that they weren't Indians because the government feel that they couldn't find. Like I said, I believe there is need for more Indians' involvement in the government
Well,
structure.
let's move on.
Mhm.
Let's move on. Now, you mentioned Burnham. And would you say that this new executive can be identified in the mold of Burnham, of Hoyt, or of Granger?
Well, first of all,
We're talking ideologically now.
ideologically, the PNC objectives remain the same.
Which is
I can't remember all.
the Burnham's objectives?
Yes.
When feed, clothe, and house
No,
the
no,
people.
no, those weren't
con-
objectives. Those were programs. Burnham had
Making the small man a real man?
those were programs. The PNC had, for instance, national unity and a number of,
But those are very vague concepts.
but they were
aren't
they were
They're very concepts. They're concepts, not
an
objectives.
yeah. Hinterland development was
That's an objective.
policy
yes,
and an
that-
objective.
That's an object. That's a different
non-alignment was.
story. That's
So, but I'm saying to you, except for non-alignment and a few, all of them virtually remain the same. What David Granger has done,
on non except for non-alignment. That's a major thing.
no. Not only non-alignment, ownership and control has been changed.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have the PNC document in front of
The
me.
commanding heights of the economy.
No, that
will-
has been removed. That is not part of the objectives.
now
but
when
But the concept of self-reliance still remains.
self-reliance, and we are in the middle of practically. We've virtually contracted out our sovereignty over one of the most important resources, petroleum.
What do
If-
you mean by that?
Well, ExxonMobil controls has a monopoly. It has a contract that the government cannot touch. And I would like to talk to you
This
later.
is the contract that was developed by the PNC or under the PPP.
The PNC I'm talking about. Well, we're going to talk about it.
No.
But I
You
was
see-
asking,
no. Let's go clear.
No, we'll go
This
with
is
it.
a contract that was in 1999.
That contract expired.
Good.
So we're not talking about that contract.
Mhm.
We're talking the 2016 contract signed by Raphael Trotman.
And Raphael and the government had the opportunity to change everything.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, I don't agree with that.
It's a new contract.
I agree that more.
Or we can get to the contract. I want to deal with that. No, but I
Mhm.
was asking you. Burnham's policy, Hoyt, we know, reversed a number of Burnham's policy. Certainly the economic policies. Dramatic changes. Even electoral arrangements and so on. Granger has, we're not quite sure where he stands on some of these things. What would you say of the new executive? I don't know if you've attended any meetings, but you've certainly interacted with them. How would you identify them on with presidents, Burnham, Hoyt, or Granger?
But
With-
first of all, I wouldn't attempt to do that. What I would attempt to
But
do.
I'm asking you to.
No. I would attempt to say among those that I talk with, a lot of them have their perception of where we came from, where we are, and where we need to go. In some regard, it will be a hybrid. It will be a hybrid of Burnham and Hoyt. Because don't forget, Hoyt wasn't in a vacuum. Hoyt analyzed where Burnham was and made changes.
Reversals, not just changes.
I could name areas in which they weren't reversals.
But
they
the
were
major
they
areas
were-
were fundamental, Aubrey. I don't think we can disagree on that.
there were changes,
Fundamental,
fundamental.
yes.
Now, Granger comes at this stage in a totally new dynamic and has to look at Burnham, Hoyt, and the reality that exists. The reality of 2015 is not the reality of Hoyt.
Okay,
But let
tell
me-
me what the two are.
First of all, when Hoyt took over from Burnham, there was a public service that was still fairly effective and useful. What was inherited was, I was amazed when I went to the public service, when I went back into the government, that there were essentially no proper filing systems. A lot of the persons in the public service didn't know to operate like public servants.
So what I don't want to get, we can probably talk about that later.
Mm.
I wanted to ask you then, if that is the situation, are we seeing a new direction for the party? Where does this executive, of which you're now a prominent part, where do you see that executive taking this party and the country?
I cannot talk for the executive. I can talk about the ideas I have to put to the executive to help influence the direction. Like I said, I think David Granger, the leader of the party, in the Vredenhoek Declaration, has identified a number of things that need to be done, that should be done. Among them, one, increasing the strength of the party, including advancing and developing a broad ethnic base in the party.
How does that differ from the Sophia Declaration?
It differs from the Sophia Declaration. In
The 1974 Declaration, yes.
The 1974 Declaration was in the context of socialism. The present declaration, in my opinion, bears some resemblance of the Declaration of Sophia, but is different in than the Declaration of Sophia for its focus.
No, let me ask you then. This semblance or resemblance, is that in terms of party paramountcy?
No, it is.
How do you see, as you said, you can't speak for the executive, how do you see, is now party paramountcy discarded, and are you prepared to say that the late President Burnham was wrong to pursue such a policy?
I'll put it this way. In the context of when Burnham spoke about party paramountcy, it was in the 1970s, when a lot of the politics in Guyana, including the WPA, the PPP, the left-wing politics, was one in which it was felt that the party in government led the political way. And so, in that context, there was party paramountcy. Hold on a minute, let me finish. You know,
I'm waiting.
Let me finish.
I was expecting this big man.
Desmond Hoyt then came and felt that, look, we need to liberalize, and that we need to forego party paramountcy and ensure that there is a clear separation of state and party. That occurred, and occurred effectively. Then came the PPP. And without saying party paramountcy, the two started to merge again. And by the time we went to election, you had to be dismantling the political.
Well, tell me,
But
what do you
let me
see?
finish. You see, you're not allowing me to finish.
I know, I always have
But you're not allowed. I want to finish this because I'm saying to you, I think that President Granger, who's the leader of the People's National Congress, has stuck to the policy of separation of party and government, and is seeking to lead the government, taking into consideration, one, the rule of law, two, separation of powers, and governance based on the Constitution.
Well, we sometimes overstate this separation of power.
Yeah,
When-
agree.
I mean,
No, we agree from an academic standpoint.
well, not academic, practical standpoint.
All right.
I
don't have a problem.
You have in your National Assembly, almost everybody is. So the people who making the law, who carrying out the law, are all party people. Are all party people. You hardly have any technocrat now. We've almost abandoned that principle. The Constitution allows for technocratic ministers.
Yes, it is.
So, what then do you see as you talked earlier, Aubrey, that look, a party has a duty to serve the constituency that elected it. Now, how then do you explain and walk that thin line between party controlling the government and party separating itself from the government, but influencing it?
Now,
how do you do it?
The party, as I understand it, the party will make its policy decisions that guides its leadership. Now that party can outline policy, and then remember it's 3 political parties or more. So when the PNC as one component of the APNU will have to outline its party position, those positions discussed in the context of the APNU and then in the context of the APNU FC with the aim of influencing the direction.
Yeah.
Let me finish. But we're talking here about the party not directing the government, but developing policies to influence government direction. I think that is practical and possible.
Even though they're the same people. So they separate themselves, say, look, I'm party now, and I come out to Congress Place gate.
All right, let me give you a
I'm
practical
minister.
example. I am from the PNC.
Mm-hmm.
I went as Presidential Advisor Youth Empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
Young people want to come on a training program. I did not look at which political party they're from. I looked at young people with potential as leaders. If you go through all the courses I had, you will see the ethnic composition. Amerindian, East Indian, African.
So you were an executive rather than an advisor then?
No, I'm saying...
No, that's not... You're outlining executive functions there.
The truth of the matter is, while I was advisor, there were programs that were run on the youth empowerment. And those programs, I'm saying to you, operated as government programs without political bias. And I'm saying that can happen.
I mean, you're saying that doesn't mean that is what happened.
Well,
If you were...
I'm giving you one case in which I could say without fear of successful contradiction that the documentation could be open, people can check it,
Well,
you could go into the communities and see.
Maybe you should have made that kind of thing available because, as you know, and we don't want to get into the personalities here.
Yeah.
You came in for some heavy criticism
Yeah,
in your own role.
Everybody in this world will come for criticism.
When one looks at the list, so I want you to go back. This business, link what you said earlier about having to do to serve your constituency, but the service has to be done via the government. How do you? You do it. You have to take it to. One here, the APNU arrangement doesn't quite work, but you have to go through a cabinet and you have to go through.
All right.
The government.
If you were asking
And
me
the same
person-
people we
if
don't.
you ask me personally, I am one who believe that the procurement laws that we inherited are stacked against our communities. Clearly.
So why haven't you changed it?
No, that's the point I'm coming to. Now, I'm saying to you, as an advocate in the PNC, I go to the PNC executive. I will say to the PNC executive, look, I believe that these rules are stacked against us.
Well,
Wait a minute,
no.
you're not letting me
I want you
finish.
to tell me how. No. Aubrey, I want you to tell me
As
how.
an
Because I know. You mentioned,
Mhm.
things come back.
Mhm.
You mentioned Vincent Murray.
Mhm.
He described that piece of legislation as one of the best pieces of legislation you could find on procurement. Now you're saying that he was wrong.
And what's wrong with that?
Now you're saying that it doesn't help you.
I'm saying to you, when Winston Murray talked of the Procurement Act when it just started, that was long before the PPP arbitrarily and created the contractors that exist. Let me make it simple for you. The crew that exists now, they have all the equipment, they have all this. So once
You're
you go,
speaking of people like Courtney Benn and Brian Tiwari. Are those the people you're talking about?
name all the contractors. Don't just choose two. I know why you choose
No.
two. But let me,
They're the big ones. Those are the big ones.
well, among the big ones, if the contracts go out, only the big ones will get it. And this is not solely ethnicity. In my opinion, there need for changes so smaller people can access contracts, etc.
we hear.
Hold a minute. And therefore, if I am a PNC executive, I will say at the executive, I think we need to look at the procurement laws and see what can be done to make it serve more people than it's serving at present.
You're criticizing it without saying that you've really looked at it.
What do you mean by
but,
that?
Well, let's take your regions.
Mhm.
How have the procurement laws failed the very regions which you control?
All right, I can give you a practical example. In Region 10, or let me put it, we just built some early childhood education centers.
Where?
Linden.
Region 10.
No. One in Linden is
Oh,
6
because you
across
mentioned
one.
region.
2 in Region 3.
Yes.
All the contracts, because of how it is structured, went to the same group of people that will make money all the time. Now, in my opinion, in Region 10, in Region 3, those contracts could be done by small businessmen. And therefore, you spread the income. Hold a
Okay,
minute.
have representations been made to, say, the Procurement Commission and the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board? Has the PNC executive made those recommendations?
You're asking me, I'm now rejoining the PNC executive.
But you're speaking on issues that
No,
you ought to be able to answer.
But hear what you're trying to do. I'm saying to you, I'm now returning to the executive. And so I intend to raise this. I can now comment, like I said to you, I wasn't there for like 6 years. I can now comment on whether they raised it. I know when I look at the system, it's unfair, and not only to Afro-Guyanese, to poor Indian Guyanese, to Amerindians in the interior who cannot get contract because of how it is structured. And I will say that in my opinion, it needs to be relooked so that the small man, even though they talk about this 10% going to small business.
20%, not 10%.
10 or 20, I don't know.
20. No, it's important.
Yes.
It's important.
The evidence doesn't suggest that it is going, and there's need for a mechanism for that poorer class of people, regardless of their ethnicity, to be able to obtain contract and access resources.
Well, and as you know, the President Hoyt has appointed Mrs. Corbyn,
President Granger.
As chairperson. So again, these issues should be addressed. We talked about the executive, Richard Van der Charles, who I think was on the list of the AFC. He certainly spoke on the platform of the AFC. He has returned to the PNCR. There is talk about Raphael Trotman, who was a very prominent and popular member of the PNCR, who went to the AFC. And there's talk of his returning to the AFC. Do you think this is likely to happen?
Well,
A person of your political acuity?
I have no indication that he is going to go to the PNC. I know Richard Van Charles took a decision that he was rejoining the PNC and contested and won. I can't say, use even all the political science training to say Raphael will or will not. The most I can say is that Raphael will have to do his analysis, understand his situation, and together with his colleagues make his decision. But I see no indication that that will happen.
Tell me, this Exxon, it's not Exxon, it's Esso Exploration and Production Ghana Limited, SNC of Mexico, signed an agreement, a petroleum agreement, after the discovery of oil. 1 year after the discovery of oil. Not only one, I think there was a second one by that time. Have you read that contract? Have you read that agreement?
The answer to that is no. And when I say read, I don't mean browse. I have not studied the contract. My position is a simple one. I'm no oil specialist. I believe there are no oil specialists in Ghana that I know of. We all can read and arrive at our conclusions. I do believe, however, and I've listened to the president recently, and he said everything will be reviewed.
And but he said that contract will not be reviewed. He is on record as saying that contract will not be reviewed. He did say, you're right.
But after he said that, he said everything will be reviewed.
No, this is Monsa. Now,
No.
Let me ask you this. Are you in support of the review and renegotiation of that contract?
Now, first of all, I want to say this to you. As I see from a foreign policy standpoint, I don't see Exxon as just oil. It also has to do with your strategic interests in terms of IR, your Venezuela territorial issues. So for me, it's not purely a question of oil. Secondly, I want to make this point. I believe the government has to sit down and look at all the variables and arrive at proper decisions.
Why not you? Why not Aubrey Norton
Because
must do this as well?
No, I can do it at the personal level.
And at the executive level? Central committee level.
No,
Why
no,
not?
I can look at it
And
then
bring it
give
to-
my views to the central exec,
Yes.
which I will do whenever it comes in the game. But I'm saying to you, we are in a real situation. And don't forget, you have been around long enough to know the ill effects of doing that kind of activity.
What kind of activity?
Alright.
What kind of activity?
I lived in this country when we
No, you said
Wait a minute,
I'm
wait a minute, wait a minute.
long enough to know the activity.
Alright.
Which activity?
When you talk about renegotiating a contract, you are also raising some eyebrows. I think any government that is in a small developing country has to recognize it's dealing with powerful forces. And in review,
Burnham realized that as well, but he stood up for Ghana.
yes, but do you want the negative consequences of what Burnham had?
Which negative consequence? In
Alright.
terms of his foreign policy?
No. Listen to me. Would you admit that we face serious negative consequences because of our smallness after nationalization?
After nationalization? Our problems were merely homegrown.
No.
Aubrey, you know that.
Could I say this to you? The minute you nationalized, you developed certain problems with the Western world. You agree?
You will always develop problems if you hurt any interest.
Good.
Whether
So
it's international
I'm
or
saying
domestic.
to you now, even as we relook it, we have to look at all the interests.
Let me ask you
No,
this.
let me finish.
Yes.
We have to look at all of this. Look at the
But they
varying
don't-
interests.
they don't
Wait a
say
minute.
a lot.
Look at the varying interests and then decide which is the best way for Guyana to go.
Let me ask you this. Do you believe, and bear in mind, I hope you understand this, and I don't mean you don't, that contract was signed after oil was discovered? After all, do you believe that the government should be paying the taxes for the oil company out of its share of profit oil?
I do not.
As a basic
listen
principle.
to me. I do not want to get into the details of.
But
the
I'm
con-
asking you to.
No, because you're asking me, and I might venture.
As a principle,
I
as a
said to
principle.
you, I didn't study this.
No, but I'm
document.
asking you as a principle, the government should be paying taxes for one of its partners.
I don't want to say. I don't want to comment on that. If you ask me about the general tax policy, I would say that I believe companies should pay their own tax.
Well,
Wait a minute.
extend that.
But I can't extend it because I don't know the circumstance.
But I'm telling you what it is.
Yeah, but you telling me don't. You see, here how I operate. If I say this is a bottle of water, I would have studied it, know all the nuances, and then could say this is what I do.
So
I don't
unless you have studied something in great detail to understand all its nuances, you're not prepared to comment. Even
No,
though it's
I'm
as you said,
prepared
let me
to
finish.
com-
Let me finish. Even though, as you say, it's a foreign policy issue, but very importantly, it's a critical domestic economic issue.
I agree. I am qualified to speak on the foreign policy issue because I've studied foreign policy. I studied our strategic interests. If I'm going to talk on taxes, etc., I would consult with people who know taxes and then form my own opinion.
So you haven't done that yet. 3 years after this contract is signed, you haven't done it. Or 2 years after it's signed, you haven't done it.
I haven't. And I'm not afraid to admit it because I don't claim to be a specialist in every field.
You don't think it's something that you really ought as a leader of the party.
Correct. Now that we have spoken, I will attempt to go more in depth into it. But I have stayed out of oil because, first of all, I don't believe anybody in Guyana, frankly, we might all have the academic capacity. But when it comes to the experience, etc., to deal with it, I don't think we are prepared.
You can always use that argument with anything. You bring your collective knowledge.
I agree
to
with
something.
That. I agree. You bring your collective, but to bring your collective knowledge, you have to have people who are willing to give and take and not decide this is wrong, this is right.
Well, what has happened with that contract? There's a give. Well, let me ask you this: do you believe? And I'm asking you a legal question now. You started law, so you didn't finish the program, but I think we had our times. Do you believe that a contract that says no law can be passed that could adversely affect the interest of a particular taxpayer in this case the oil companies, that cannot increase the tax rate for 40, for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Do you believe constitutionally that's the right thing?
If it isn't right
Provide-
constitutional, it would be challenged.
No, I'm asking
and it
you.
would be,
I'm asking you.
it sounds to me.
Disability.
It sounds to me not like in keeping with the Constitution. My position will be, if we think that this is wrong, challenge it in the courts.
Well, who must challenge it?
You
Why,
just said
no, but Aubrey, why are you putting the burden on the taxpayer
well,
to go and do this? Why don't people like you, the political leaders, do this kind of work?
do which kind of work?
Do that kind of examination and say, you know what? Even though I'm a member of the central executive of the party, I feel that this stability clause that forbids all parliaments, whilst this agreement remains in effect, 56 years, cannot touch the terms of this contract. I am not prepared to accept that, and I'm prepared to go to court to challenge it.
I am prepared to go and look at them and arrive at my own conclusions. The truth of the matter is, my intention was not to get into oil because I am following the debate. I know people have strong position. I know your position is very strong, but I want to be able to look at these issues and then decide for myself. As you asked me here, I am taking your word. I'm not saying you're dishonest and it's not true. I'm merely saying.
No, you can say I'm dishonest, that's
No,
fine.
I
But you can
wouldn't.
go and, there is a stability clause.
All right, I can go and look at the stability clause and then I can decide what is it, my position in it.
Now, assuming you find that it's unacceptable, that it violates the principle, no parliament can bind succeeding parliaments. That's Article 65. The whole power of parliament is to make laws for the peace, order, and good government. What would you do?
I will raise it in the central executive of the PNC and ask it to be addressed at the government level. And I see no problem with that. You see, I believe that if you disagree with something in the first instance and you're a member of a political party, you seek to deal with it within the party. If you get in nowhere, then it's another issue. But I come from a party in which, since I was a little boy, we could raise issues and they're addressed. And I believe in this case, once it is raised, it will be addressed.
Let me ask you this. We go back to, let's move off. You haven't read the contract.
I didn't say I didn't read it.
You,
So
you
I haven't
said-
studied it.
No, you said you
I
just
yes, and I wouldn't
Partial
comment on
reading.
something until I
All right.
studied it.
Okay, you've studied politics. You've lived politics. You know there's a lot of disenchantment, disillusionment, disappointment with the political parties in this country. The youths are finding, despite Chris Jones heading, and I congratulate him, despite him heading the list, the party in government is still dominated by persons whose average age is approaching 70.
Well, the average age is not approaching 70, but the average age is lower than
But
that.
at the top level,
Correct. That's a different point.
Now, how do you restore youths and young people's confidence in this political system that seems to be a question of revolving chair? You get the PPP, they practice their corruption, they get the new government already building up its own repertoire of very, very questionable transactions that people are labeling corruption. How do you restore confidence in that,
First of
situation?
all, let us start with the youth.
Mhm.
We have to face what is the reality of the youth. And I'm telling you this from data I would have collected. When we came to government, I went across this country asking young people questions. You ask a question like, have you ever chaired a meeting? No. Are you in any organization? No. Have you been in any leadership position? No. That's how we end up starting to train youth leaders. In my opinion, when I was coming up, by the time I was 18, 19, I'd been to training programs and you had the basis, we call it. Let us accept that for many years, there was no training of young people.
Is that a criticism of the YSM? No, I am asking you direct questions, Aubrey.
Yes, it is. I came out to the YSM.
And what did you do about it?
I'm saying to you, I came out to the YSM. There was a certain amount of training.
Meaning that you were a product of the YSM?
Yes, and you got the training, etc.
What happened?
I am a lover of Heights policies, but one of the things that happened when you changed with the direction with Desmond Height is that you shift from political to economic, and the political training that occurred before didn't. So you were talking about years, and then the PPP came into power 7 years after Height. You're talking about years in which young people weren't trained politically and otherwise. So to me, the solution is you train a lot of young people in leadership, you provide them with a lot of scholarships, etc., and you have to mentor many of them, and then place them in the government service. I can give you cases when I took over youth empowerment. There were many young people there who they'd come to you. You send for them and they come with a bare hand. When I coming up, you came with a notepad. You took your notes so that you could act. You had to teach something as simple as that. You have to restore in the public service and among young people this ability to take things seriously, to make the notes and to operate.
You're conflating the public service with the party, or
I'm saying to you, it is all pervasive. It was in the public service, it was outside of the public service. You go out there and talk to young people and ask them what kind of training they got to prepare them for the jobs they are asking for. And there's little or no training. However, I want to make this point. I believe young people are a human resource to develop. And once we develop them, mentor them, and put them there, they will do a good job. But I do not believe that the mere fact of youth entitles you to promotion. You just have to look.
I don't think anybody asked for that.
No, I mean, you would agree that Barajagde was promoted as a youth. And
that's a different story. I'm not talking about Barajagde.
I'm talking about the disaster that followed.
I'm not talking about Jagdeo. We're talking. Why is it? Now, I think you had migration. Is that inward migration or outward migration?
No, migration has always been both internal and external.
No, I'm asking you for your particular portfolio.
As I understand it, it's head of migration.
And it's incoming as well as external, as outgoing migration?
I could only give you my concept of migration at this stage.
No, but you're in the job, aren't you?
Yes, but don't forget, when I went to youth, the first thing I did was try to develop youth policies based on the reality. At present, I'm just studying migration and looking at it. When I look at it...
Were you given a job description?
Yeah, you get a job description.
And should not contain it?
You should contain it in a job description, but you also have got to look at the problems again and conceptualize. Let me give you a practical example. Let's say we define migration as people coming from Venezuela or into Guyana.
Mm-hmm.
And you forget that an oil industry is coming, right? And this oil industry, when it comes, if you don't do what you should do in agriculture, people will migrate from agriculture to oil.
Is that kind of
No,
migration?
I'm just saying to you.
I'm asking you.
I'm saying to you.
You're playing on some words there.
I am looking at all elements, and then we will discuss what is the focus. You see,
let me ask you this.
Let us not fool ourselves, you know. Every designation you get, there can be a plethora of things you could do, but you have to look at what the country needs immediately and act on those while looking at the long term.
Well, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
The statistics indicate that 80 and above % of the graduates of the University of Guyana migrate outwards. And that this continues. What is your knowledge now of that rate of migration?
I can't tell you what is the exact rate of migration.
Approximate?
No, I wouldn't. I don't like guessing.
No, but your migration is your portfolio.
Yes, but could I ask you, who did the analysis of 2015 to 2018 so that I could comment and say, well, you see, we look at anecdotal evidence.
No, I'm not talking about anecdotal. That's why I invite you.
That's what I'm saying to you. That's what I'm saying to you. unless we have actual statistics for that period, it would be wild of me.
Are you collecting that kind of information?
Not as yet.
Not as yet. Okay.
If I
Let's-
have
let's-
intention, once it falls under the purview, I would. But I want to make this point to you. Even though there is migration, we have to look. We have to look. This is a modern world of technology. Okay? And there's a dimension of migration which people don't pay attention to. Skills can migrate without the person. In other words, you need a specialist who's Guyanese in America. You don't necessarily have to have them here. You can put mechanisms in place where, via the internet, etc., they can serve you.
That's good theory. That's good theory. You want people. You want people.
There are people in Guyana who are doing work for
I'm
people
sure.
overseas.
I am sure there is, but that's in very specialist fields.
Good.
In very specialist fields.
Mhm.
But when these people leave, what's your perception, or what's your information of the principal reasons why youths still migrate out of Ghana?
Migration, historically, in the main, has been
No, I'm asking
for
you now. I'm asking you now.
economic survival issues. Have always been.
That's an indictment of the current system, then, isn't it?
We will be fooling ourselves if we don't accept that wages are low in Guyana, etc., and people migrate for economic betterment.
Whilst so we talk about they migrate because of all these things, and we talk about for the good life. So it's the contradiction in
No,
politics that I'm talking about.
Good, for the good life, you have to put the mechanisms in place to ensure that, one, your graduates stay,
Mm-hmm.
and two, you put mechanisms to have them come back. Your good life, as I understand it, is an ideal that you set yourself, and then you take policy measures to ensure that you satisfy it. Don't forget, nobody could build a good life in 3 years.
Let me
You
ask.
could put a framework in place for it.
But the framework in place, but these very people for whom you are setting this framework are saying, I gone.
That's a reality.
That's
But you still have got to work on it and put a framework in place.
Now, the APNU saw the AFC joining it in a coalition for the 2015 elections.
Mhm.
Preceding the elections, and the basis of that coalition was this Commingsburg Accord. What is your view of the Commingsburg Accord that guaranteed the AFC, I think it's 40%? Did you think the objective factors, and I'll ask you what those were, that would justify that level of participation
Look,
in terms of ministries?
all right, let me say this to you. You're dealing here with strategy.
Mm-hmm.
The AFC might have been a small party, but it was necessary to get them in the coalition. You agree? And
I'm asking you to explain.
no, I'm explaining to you. And so, a lot of times, when you are small, but you wield the balance, you can get more than out of it over and above your size. And that doesn't only happen in the case of AFC. If you go through history,
So you're saying it happened in the case of the AFC?
I think that in proportion to the size of the AFC, yes, they got a good bit of seats. However, I don't necessarily believe it's a bad thing. Because first of all, let's assume they didn't come. Would you have been in power? Or you'd have been in a situation where the PPP is in power and you got the majority. So if to me...
So it was purely political opportunism then?
Well,
right?
I won't
I'm
call
going to put it that way.
You
I'm
see,
putting
you call
that
it
way.
political
Yes,
opportunism.
yes.
I would
Because
call
of the
it
explanation you give
strategic
me.
political thinking.
It's political opportunism.
You see,
No.
it is easy for somebody to say somebody is an opportunist. But here you have the APNU, whose supporters were being battered by the PPP.
Mhm.
You had the AFC, some of whom had left the PPP and some of whom they want to see the PPP. You then wanted to get political power. Therefore, you would have made a deal that permitted you to get political power. In that process,
I like your word, make a deal. I like that word.
Obviously.
Is your, okay, good.
Are you assuming that there was no deal?
No, all right.
You see, sometimes we try to be politically correct and we run from reality. The reality
I'm glad
is...
you call it a deal.
It's what it was.
Now, for all of that, the APNU is now saying to the AFC, you go into local government elections by yourself.
But I don't know that that is true. As I understand it, the AFC and the APNU met, conditions were set out, and the AFC opted to run on its own.
That's not true. That's not true.
I said as I understand
Yes,
it.
but that's not true.
I don't know that the APNU could have said to the AFC, you go on your own.
No. But it's the AFC wanted the same kind of conditions that for the 2015 election. Do you
For local government.
Yes.
And something is wrong with us saying that, look, assuming that what you're saying is correct, that look, that was for the national election, local government, you need to probably go and prove yourself and then we work it out.
I like how you word it. I like how you word it. Now, there are lots of people, Aubrey, who say that the government, the PNCR, has not always played fair with coalition partners. We've known situations, the UF in the past.
You guys, what do you mean by play fair? Tell me what was unfair.
Well, in terms of the you
19,
record, hold on.
64, 60,
Yes, when Burnham actually encouraged the Randolph Cheeks and others from the UF to join the PNC.
So
that's a historical fact.
It's a historical fact, but was Burnham wrong to mobilize political support for his own party?
Well, doesn't show mala fide. Me and you in business, and whilst we do it, well, we got this joint project. We partners. We're trying to poach each other's.
All right. What happens if we are partners, and one partner decides he wants to take your strength? What would you do? Look, politics is not church. Politics is reality. When you go into a coalition, let me finish. Let me finish.
I'm looking at time,
when you go in a coalition, you can't take out of your head that your coalition partner is seeking to strengthen himself, and therefore you would be.
Well,
stupid.
not to shaft you.
I said strengthen. Shaft is your choice to hold.
That's mine.
But I'm saying to you, coalitions are by nature conflict oriented, and in a coalition, I try to increase my strength. You try to increase my strength, and so. While I accept that there are pitfalls of coalition, the political reality is that the pursuit of power has always been based on deals and people seeking to obtain your support. The PPP, while they were in government, were trying their best to get the PNC support base.
Let me ask you this. Would you be supporting the model of the Cummingsburg Accord for the 2020 elections?
I believe that coalition is good for Guyana.
Yes.
I don't want to go and say the model meaning this 40 or what. I believe the APNU and AFC should work out an arrangement in the context of 2020 and go to the election as a coalition with a proper agreement.
Do you believe the performance at the local government elections should be a key indicator and possibly a determinant of what that arrangement should be?
I think it should be one of the variables. When you say a key, when you
I'm asking.
No,
key,
you see, I don't want to say key because the nature of local government is different to national elections. For instance, Georgetown is 100,000 people plus, but it is one constituency, and you might win. You get what I'm saying?
Go on.
When
you say one constituency, what do you mean?
In the national elections, Georgetown, if it got 140 something thousand people votes, it will go to the whole national count. And so its impact will be different. When you're in a local government election, it don't matter that it's 100,000, you win one council. It don't matter that New Amsterdam is so much Linden is something, you win 2 councils, 3 councils.
Let me ask you this. So you're saying it should be an ingredient.
It should be an ingredient, but I don't want to say it is the determinant because you're talking about 2 different types of elections.
What I know is in the good old days when I could invite President Granger,
Mm.
then in opposition, to come and play dog, he said the AFC must show its numbers.
But I don't see it as a problem.
You see they must show their numbers.
But I don't think
Com-
numbers solely should determine. Because
What are the factors?
take the WPA. Some people say the WPA bring nothing. I said no, they brought a lot. Because you see, if you do correlation calculation just in terms of mere numbers, you might be making a mistake. A party can bring intellectual competence to a table. How do you value that? Just solely on votes? Then a party might come, and because that party come, you got an increased votes because the people who had disagreed with them come with them. It's not as straightforward as we
Give me a
make it.
quick answer
Mhm.
on this last point. Constitutional reform. This government has failed on constitutional reform. It's done nothing. It was supposed to be one of the 100 days commitment. What's your a quick comment?
I believe in constitutional reform, and I do believe that at some stage we need to sit and work on constitution.
And the government has failed in that area.
Well, I didn't go down the road of saying the government is
In,
failing.
in its commitment.
Listen,
In its commitment.
The government, to me, were not able to carry out constitutional reform. I think the government is committed to constitutional reform. But I wouldn't say the government has failed.
All right, Aubrey, I would accept that you wouldn't. Thank you very much, sir.
And thank you for having me. It's
I
always
want you
good
to come back and let's talk about this oil contract. I really want to talk.
All right, I promise you I'll research it in detail and then I can come.
Operators and viewers, thank you, good night, and I'll see you next week.